Welcome to Uncovered. I'm Anthony Davis. He's Ron Filipkowski. Together we uncover the MAGA propaganda that is not covered by the mainstream and corporate media. Ron, we have a lot to discuss. Of course, at this very moment, Donald Trump is currently pressing a random number generating machine, trying to decide which tariffs will be announced in a minute or two. They say he's coming out at 4 o'clock Eastern, which is right now. We're keeping an eye on that, and if he does step out, we'll play in some of the audio in the feed and get a sense of how he's pulling this off, if at all. Let's first, though, dive into some good news. Is it fair to say that the news out of Wisconsin last night is really good for Democrats and for the country as a whole?
I'll say. I mean, Wisconsin is obviously a key swing state, very important. And this was going to decide the balance of power on the Supreme Court. There is redistricting happening in Wisconsin. Musk and other, even some of the Republican congressmen from Wisconsin said this could cost them 2 or 3 seats in Congress. This election could actually make the difference in the midterms between who controls Congress. So sure. I mean, what showed how important this was certainly to Republicans is how much they went all in on their money. When you added up all the total spending, including the 21 million that Musk put in, with all the other spending, Schimmel's campaign, Republicans spent $53 million on this judicial race, which is an all-time record for a judicial race. So, and Musk was out there saying, this is going to be the end of Western civilization if they lose. So obviously this was a very, very important race. And Susan Crawford ran a great race. I thought it was interesting that down the stretch, Schimmel tried to distance himself from Musk. Obviously, His polls were showing that Musk was probably hurting him more than helping. And I think what we're going to see going forward, because there's been a lot of reporting behind the scenes of Republicans in Congress grumbling about the Musk factor, is that they're going to want Musk's money, but they're not going to want Musk. They're not going to want him in their district. They're in their states doing rallies, doing these giveaways and lotteries and all that. They're perfectly happy to accept his money, but they don't. But he's becoming very toxic.
Yeah, it's so interesting, isn't it? Because this is the great thing about politics. You can't really predict how people are going to react to a certain stunt in this case. And we know that Musk obviously heavily influenced the general election in November with his $270-odd million investment there. But clearly now the toxicity, just by nature of seeing the protests outside Tesla dealerships, the way that Pam Bondi has reacted to how to deal with protesters at Tesla dealerships, I don't think has done the Republicans any favors, because they want to be able to have to peacefully protest for their own things without fear of being given the death penalty or whatever it is she's offering. So I think that what is changing is this sense that Musk is this kind of perfect candidate for pushing Republican politics in that direction that they want. I think it is backfiring. And in fact, there's an argument going on at the moment from Caroline Levitt as to whether or not Trump has not fired Musk, but whether Musk is going to be stepping down and stepping back from his responsibility leading Doge. He was only going to be doing it for 180 days or something.
Yeah, I just read a really good story about this. I think it was Politico that talked to a lot of insiders, and there's definitely division inside the Trump White House about there's two very polarizing figures that have divided the insiders in the Trump White House. One is Howard Lutnick, which we'll talk about in connection with the tariffs.
Yeah, he's a joke.
Who has really divided the staff, where you have half of them who hate his guts and half who like him, and then Musk is the other polarizing figure, and I think Musk has upset more Republicans in Congress because they view him as a liability. I mean, rewind, we often forget, it's hard to remember because everything's a blur, but prior to the November election, Musk's not much was known from the general public. I mean, hardcore political people, social media people knew his political views, but the general public did not. They just viewed him as a car salesman and a rocket guy. Yeah. They didn't really know and they didn't think he was going to play a major role in the government. They thought he was going to be an advisor on budget cuts. And then, after the election, we find out, okay, he's going to be part of the administration. Well, we didn't really know that. And then the next thing you know, he's basically taking over the government and firing people, mass firing. So his approval ratings went, straight down. He went from being
as did the share price
unknown, along with his Tesla share price.
Yeah.
We went from being a largely unknown commodity to the general public as far as his political views,
right,
to somebody who is despised. And so I think that this is a problem for Donald Trump that he now realizes. And there were people in the story I read, there were people that were actually inside sources in the Trump administration who were saying they actually hoped that they lost this Wisconsin race because that was the only thing they thought that would get through to Trump, that you need to get rid of this guy or at least distance yourself from him.
Levitt's argument on behalf of the White House was that he is going to stay until all his work at Doge is done. That is contrary to what was said previously, that he had a kind of a term limit, effectively working as this, government advisor that isn't running Doge, but is running Doge in name only, but it's not him. So who only knows how this is gonna play out. I want to show this clip, though, of him, as you said, at this Wisconsin rally a couple of days ago, basically making a similar case as he did back in November, that this is life or death. And if the Republican doesn't win, then it's the end of civilization as we know it. Let's take a look.
It's just how important it is. They think it's just, some kind of judicial thing that's not that important. But it actually, what they're doing, what's happening on Tuesday is a vote for which party controls the U.S. House of Representatives. That is why it is so significant. And whichever party controls the House, it to a significant degree controls the country, which then steers the course of Western civilization. So it's like, I feel like this is one of those things that may not seem that it's going to affect the entire destiny of humanity, but I think it will. No pressure. Yeah.
I mean, he said a similar thing in November, like if Trump didn't win the election, he'd be finished. I often think that this is more about him than it is about the Republicans or the country as a whole. And by the way, Trump has just kind of gone into the Rose Garden, and so I'll keep an eye on it, but if he mentions anything about actual specific numbers on tariffs, we'll switch over to it. So how much skin does Elon Musk have in the game in Wisconsin there? I mean, why is he being so kind of resolute about this?
I just think when you live in this bubble where he has no social life to speak of, not much life. He reportedly, sleeps in the White House in his office. He's had beds put in there. He's online on social media 24 hours a day. Last night it was all night. I looked at his account. He was posting all night, midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, all throughout the night. So he doesn't sleep very much either. So he's created this like fictional world. It's like an AI world, dystopian universe, where everything is life or death and everything is all or nothing, and the world's going to end. He also talks about the fact that we aren't having enough babies, and that's going to cause civilization to collapse. Every other day he's predicting the end of the world. And so I think that wears people out after a while. You can only say that so much. So, and I think, maybe when you say, if we don't win the presidency of the United States, really bad stuff could happen. People can buy into that. But when you start saying a Wisconsin judge race is going to end Western civilization, I think that's when you start losing some credibility.
That's when the ketamine by prescription is kicking in, maybe. Yeah, I don't quite.
No Democrat was saying that. I mean, we all wanted to win, but we weren't saying like this is the end of the world if we lose this race.
But he's so emphatic, and maybe. I don't know, maybe it's the Asperger's, or maybe it's something about him where he struggles to communicate and make a point.
Yeah, sure.
And so the way he can really, because he can't do it emotionally, because he is emotionally stunted, clearly. So the way to do it is with additional use of language. And, I have an autistic son, so I kind of understand, the way the communication sometimes is impeded. And so the way to do it is to go all in with your language. And you say things like, it's the end of the world as we know it, which is translated is, this is really important to me.
Yeah, and like we said, most voters, like, they're not on Twitter. They're not watching CNN or MSNBC or Fox. They're just taking their kids to softball games and little league games and choir practice and living their life. And so when they catch like 30 seconds of the 6 o'clock news and they see this nut up there talking about the end of the world, if they don't win this judge race, I think it just makes him look like a freak and a weirdo. And I think he wears out his welcome with people. And I definitely believe he's done that in the White House, which is why, for all they can spin this however they want. Oh, he was always planning to leave. No, I follow Musk very closely and listen to everything he has to say. No, he was talking about being there for most of the duration of Trump's term. Yeah. Now, all of a sudden, it's, I'm leaving soon. So,
well, he's probably also getting a lot of heat from the businesses that he hasn't been attending to.
That too.
And Tesla, as we know, with the share price, but not just the share price. I mean, it's also clearly the lack of sales. Sales are down significantly. The protests and the criminal damage, the graffiti and everything else to some of these dealerships. It's a problem for him.
Well, right now, I mean, the Cybertruck was a complete disaster. Not only did they have to recall all of them, I mean, there's new reporting out today about how they have a bunch of them just shitting in showrooms, thousands and thousands of Cybertrucks that they've built that they can't get rid of. They can't sell them. Their resale value is like nothing. They go down. Their resale value right now, they depreciate 55% in 1 year. There's no car that loses its value that fast. So you can't give them away. No one will take them as trade-ins. No car dealerships will take a Cybertruck as a trade-in for another car, as many of these owners are finding out. So, this was his big product for the last 2 years that he developed, and it's been a disaster. So
I have a
more than his political involvement that's causing him financial problems.
Right. I have a friend who pre-ordered one 3 years ago before Elon Musk came out as insane. And so it arrived, and they didn't really know what to do with it, this couple. They're like, do we keep it? Do we sell it? They're Democrats. And so they decided to keep it because they needed a truck. And they've been telling me how terrible it is. But the thing I find most interesting about it is they drive it around and they get a combination of MAGA people going, yeah, to them while they're driving it around. And then they also get a huge amount of abuse from people, giving them the middle finger and shouting F Elon and all this stuff. And so I've seen a couple of ways that people are handling it. I saw a great clip of someone had the Toyota logo printed in very large letters across the back of the Cybertruck. It's not a Tesla, it's a Toyota. And my friend has a F Elon sign at the back, just below the logo. I mean, this is what people are doing. They can't sell their Teslas because the value has dropped out of them on the used market too.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's definitely going to be interesting to watch how this all plays out going forward. Again, I think that they're going to have to find a way to get Elon to. And the other thing that a lot of them are complaining about is his social media posts.
Yeah.
They're going to have to find a way to where they can utilize his money, but not have his name or his involvement in anything. I don't know if he's the type of person that's willing to do something like that. Take a back seat, keep his mouth shut, not post about a race on social media. It doesn't seem like he has the ability to, pull things back. But largely a lot of that depends on the politicians themselves. I think I posted this last night after this Wisconsin race. I think what you're going to see is a significant number, especially of Republicans, especially in swing districts, who are going to say to Elon Musk, we just, please don't come in our district. I don't want you anywhere near my race.
I mean, Trump
I
had a
really
bit of that.
believe that's going to happen next year.
Trump had a bit of that during the midterms last time
Sure.
around. Do you remember where he was endorsing candidates who were so crazy and completely, unqualified, but because they were loyal to him and they spoke his language, he endorsed them, and they were all losing. And after a while, people were like, I don't want Trump's endorsement. Let me go this alone. Let's talk about tariffs now, because obviously Trump's calling today Liberation Day. I called it, he posted on Truth Social, it's Liberation Day for America. And I reposted it and said it's Hibernation Day for retail. I mean, this is going to not just crash the U.S. economy, but this is going to, let's just hypothetically say it's a 25% increase on most goods. That's the number that we're kind of hearing. There's 20% on steel. There's a few caveats to that. And as I say, Trump is in the Rose Garden right now. He currently has a man. Oh, he just announced 25% tariff on cars and car parts. That's flashed up. So, this is going to just simply make things unaffordable. This will be passed on by the retailer as the importer.
The car part thing, by the way, raises car insurance because that raises the cost of car repairs. See, there's all these hidden costs and tariffs that people don't even think about or realize. So the car insurance industry already announced like a couple weeks ago that like we are raising car insurance rates if a tariff is put on auto parts, because obviously who pays for a lot of these car repairs? Car insurance companies. So the cost of those are going up. So these are the things. Here's what I can also tell you, like on back to Lutnick. So Lutnick has been the driving force behind tariffs. That is what the reporting is.
Right.
There are people inside the Trump White House who are very much against tariffs, including his Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, probably his Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles, and a lot of the old guard. But then you have people like Peter Navarro, who's his trade representative, and Howard Lutnick, who is kind of a newly introduced into the Trump orbit.
What's Lutnick's story? What's his line of business?
Yeah, he was an investment banker, Wall Street guy. He's a shyster. He's a huckster. He's a con man. He's a lot like Trump, except the Wall Street version of Trump rather than the real estate version of Trump.
Right.
Trump had brought him in because, he's the guy who pitches all these wild ideas and that's selling the citizenship cards and a lot of the crypto stuff. Like a lot of this stuff comes from Lutnick.
Yeah. The gimmicks.
And so there are a lot of people inside the Trump administration who believe that tariffs is going to be a disaster. It's going to really hurt their political capital. It's going to hurt their agenda. It's going to hurt their polling, hurt them in the midterms. And they blame Lutnick. And what a lot of them think is that, if the market does tank and the economy does go south, that they are going to use that to push Lutnick out. That is their plan. They think that, if bad things happen because of the tariffs, all of the blame is going to go on Lutnick and he'll end up getting fired. So there is definitely very much disagreement. There's huge disagreement in Congress over these tariffs. Even Trump's staunchest supporters, when asked to defend the tariffs, just say, hey, we need to just trust Trump. He knows what he's doing. It'll all work out in the end. So they can't even really articulate why this is a good idea.
Trump can't either.
They trust in Trump.
Yeah. I mean, we should remind people, this is Trump's only mechanism for bringing revenue into the kind of federal coffers, because he's using it as leverage because he wants to reduce corporation tax and taxes for the wealthiest Americans. And so there has to be some other way of bringing money in, and he's using it as a cover to say that it's going to be those foreign countries. Today it's reciprocal tariffs is the way he's describing it in this conference right now, and of 25%. And it's just not going to work. It didn't work last time. He uses a reference from like decades ago, before we had this global trade community. He doesn't quite understand about free trade, or if he does, he's wildly misinformed.
He really has no understanding of macroeconomics or, the international trade. It's not something that he ever really dealt with much as a businessman, as a real estate developer. People think he understands it because he was a real estate developer, but he really doesn't. He wasn't involved in buying and selling goods across the world.
Well, there's nothing reciprocal about real estate, is there? It's like, here's the building, you give me money for the building, and that's it. It's over. It's a one-time transaction.
Yeah, or you rent it or you sell off pieces or whatever. Yeah, sure. So, the other problem is like the justification for these tariffs. I mean, you mentioned bringing in revenue. He occasionally mentions that. Yes, okay. He's even talked about giving like rebate checks to the American people, which makes no sense because, the Senate just asked for a $5 trillion increase in the debt ceiling for their new budget. The House is asking for $4 trillion. They have to agree on that number. So they're already conceding that the deficit is going to go up $4 to $5 trillion more with their new budget. So why the hell is Trump talking about sending rebate checks to the American people from tariffs? But, we've also heard that the tariffs are about fighting fentanyl. We've also heard it's about bringing manufacturing back to the United States. We've also heard it's about getting other countries to lower their tariffs. So, I mean, it rolls out a different justification for these things every day because they're just throwing shit at the wall. There is no real plan here. And look, tariffs was not talked about hardly at all during the campaign. And now this has become the centerpiece of his economic plan when he barely mentioned this at all when he was running for president.
And the percentages are all off the top of his head. There is no kind of economic strategy behind it. It's numbers that he thinks he can announce and have it sound dramatic. What about the argument that some people say that this whole thing is designed for him to roll it back and he's using it as a negotiation tactic? And that, because he has done this with Mexico, they asked for, a month off for the car industry, various things, Canada as well. Is he using this as bait, or is this just, the best he can do?
No, that's a very, very real possibility. It's something that I talked about a lot last year. On the rare occasions he did mention tariffs on the campaign trail, I said the thing to look at is the tariff waivers, who he grants waivers to, what industries, what companies he gives tariff waivers to. Because, if he's going to do it like that, then it's just going to be rife with corruption and chaos, which is, his typical way of doing everything. So, if he's going to do it like every country needs to come to him individually and say, I want you to lift tariffs on our wine industry, we're willing to do this if you do that. I think that that's kind of what he wants. And some of the reporting from his insiders have said that Trump revels in that. He loved getting a call from Macron,
groveling
about their champagne industry.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, he absolutely, that's what he likes about the job more than anything, is presidents, prime ministers from around the world calling him to say, hey, please don't do this to us. What can we do for you? And I think that if countries are willing to play this game with him and with us, it's not going to go well for anybody. It just seems to me like what they all need to do is sort of present a united front to the United States. But I don't know, it's so haphazard, and there's such a, I would get it if he just said 20% across the board, all foreign imports, all tariffs, except for maybe a handful of countries that don't put any tariffs on us. I would get that, but no, it doesn't appear like we're going down that road. It appears we're going down a very chaotic, corrupt road with these tariffs.
He's calling it his Declaration of Economic Independence. That's the announcement today. He's wearing an awful lot of orange makeup as well. He's really kind of pushed the boat out there on the Cheetos. I get a sense that if you look at his way of presenting this thing as a day of economic independence, that is him and branding all over. So he's probably more excited about the slogan than he is about the detail of the tariffs and the revenue that they generate, because that's who he is. He's a propagandist, a marketeer.
Yeah, Liberation Day. Yeah, I mean, That's what he does. He'll come up with a name for something, and then that almost makes him like the idea more. You're right.
Right, like Space Force.
If the name is good, then he likes the idea more. And you know, what proves this point is he was always frustrated during the 2023 primary at coming up with a nickname for DeSantis, right?
Yeah.
And you saw him roll out like 6 or 7 different nicknames, and he was never happy with any of them. He never thought any of them were perfect. You know, whether it was DeSanctimonious or Meatball Ron or whatever it was. And so you see how important these little nicknames are to him, that he labels people with. So yeah, I think he feels like that's the branding is as important as the policy itself. And if people believe that the tariffs are liberating, you know, then that'll help sell it. But you know, you can't really fool people. What tariffs are is basically a national sales tax. It's like putting a national sales tax of 25% on which would be the largest tax increase in American history. So really, I think that's what Democrats need to do, is say, this is the largest tax increase in American history. And it's not on like wage earners or income. It's on consumers. So it's on everyone who buys something is going to get hit with this tax. So it's the most regressive tax you could possibly get that will affect low wage earners much more, in real terms, much more than the wealthy, which is another reason why Trump likes it.
Just to quote him, he just said, the United States cannot continue with a unilateral policy of economic surrender. We have to take care of our people, and we have to take care of our people first. This is an angle that I think he has communicated to senior Republicans to kind of repeat, and that is that the America has been taken advantage of for so long. And this is, you know, the U.S. getting its own back on the fact that we have built nations. And your favorite lawmaker, Tommy Tuberville, has talked about this. Let's have a quick look.
Coming in, yeah. That's all over the country. I mean, it's no different. But we have built China, the American taxpayers. We have built the Middle East. We have built Europe. So now it's time they help us build back our country after we've helped them so much, and that happens through tariffs. So, I mean, it's going to be a slow process. There's going to be some pain before gain, but we've got to do it.
Again, this makes no economic sense. It makes there's no intellectual argument here. There are no top economists working behind the scenes who have drawn up this plan. This is all showmanship. Trump has just walked out with, Howard Lutnick's just brought out this board into the Rose Garden with a list of reciprocal tariffs, where it shows all the countries, it shows, you know, what the new tariff is going to be. And these numbers are anywhere between 14% and 32% by the looks of things. Let's have a quick listen to what he's saying.
They took all of our computer chips and semiconductors. We used to be the king, right? We were everything. We had all of it. Now we have almost none of it, except the biggest company is coming in. We're going to end up with almost 40%. Lee Zeldin's working to get their approvals. And it's an amazing company. Mr. Wei, of one of the great companies of the world, actually, they're coming in from Taiwan, and they're going to build one of the biggest plants in the world, maybe the biggest for that.
That's never going to happen.
But 64%, we're going to charge them 32%. Japan, very, very tough, great people. And again, I don't blame the people for doing it. I think they're very smart in doing it. I blame the people that sat right in that Oval Office, right over there, right behind the Resolute desk or whichever desk they chose.
Again, Ron, I mean, I get the feeling that he just relishes the idea of sticking it to anybody that's not, a white American, and so this is how he feels about anybody that doesn't look like him.
Yeah, it's hard to. I mean, going back to Tuberville's comments too.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we built these countries. There is a theme, and among some of these protectionist people, and the theme is that they're not worldly people. They're not people who have traveled. There's not people who have been around the world, or if they do travel, they go to, you know, tourism bubbles. Yes. You know, like a sandals resort or something, you know, or they go to, you know, the Vatican. They don't really understand the world, and Trump, what does Trump know about Japan? He knows nothing about Japan. He met the prime minister a couple times, and and that's about it. He's never traveled in Japan. He knows nothing about their country, their economy, nothing. And their mentality is that the U.S. is responsible for all of their success. That's the mentality. You heard them. Like, we saved Europe, we built China. Our economy is the only reason why these countries even exist and are able to feed themselves. It's such an ignorant approach to the world. It's so dumb, and it just shows. I mean, look, we can do like a macroeconomics 101 class here, but look, there's some countries that do things better than others based on the natural resources they have, the talent they have, the environment that they have. And that's what free trade is all about. It's not about everybody making the same products and selling them to each other. It's about, hey, we do things better than other countries. They do things better than us. And we exchange those things and share that thing, share those things and trade with each other. And human civilization has been that way for 5,000 years.
But it's also the exchange of ideas as well. It's not just about the bottom line.
Right.
It's about you make each other better, which is why China has copied Tesla and done it better, because they were able to. And that does work both ways. And so he just has it's because of, I think a lot of it goes back to racism. He has a very isolationist view of the world. The US does it better. I've often talked about how this country is the most marketed and branded. There's no other country that brands itself the greatest country in the world, or has this marketing slogan of the American dream and what that means. I'm very much of the opinion that the US, despite being 31st in the world education standards, still claims to be the greatest country in the world. And so that disparity, he kind of plays into that. It's like he has fallen for the marketing campaign and so continues with this whole shtick. I mean, it's just not how the world works.
It'll be interesting to watch the markets tomorrow, because, they didn't do much today, because I think that a lot of people on Wall Street and in various industries were not really sure that he was actually going to go through with this, because, he's changed his mind so many times and pulled these back. But it does appear he's serious. The fact that he brought out Lutnick today, who is the main guy who wants to impose very serious tariffs, because they actually do think, if they truly believe that it's going to result in a manufacturing boom in the United States, and they truly believe that all of these foreign companies, including automakers and everything else, are going to basically shut down plants in the countries that they're at and all move here, which is what they believe is going to happen, then they're going to go through with this to the map, because they're going to believe that this is going to cause short-term pain, but by this time next year, this is going to be the greatest thing ever. And they just simply don't understand the global economy and the way it works. And they're also not taking into effect how much the other countries retaliating against us and imposing reciprocal tariffs against us is going to hurt our country. Because keep in mind, the United States being a representative democracy, all you need to do is hurt as let's say Canada. Canada just needs to hurt Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Maine, a few key swing states, Michigan, with their tariffs, and that could change the whole political landscape in Congress, because you're already hearing it from those representatives, whether it's from Alaska or Maine with Susan Collins, Murkowski, and others, including Kentucky. Rand Paul and Mitch McConnell are dead set against us, because Kentucky exports a lot of stuff to Canada. So you don't have to sort of convince the whole United States if you're a country like Canada with your reciprocal tariffs. If you punish industries in a few key states, in swing states that decide our elections, you can have a big bang for your buck with targeted tariffs if you're a smaller country.
Well, he's just announced a 10% tariff on all countries. I guess that's in addition to the reciprocal tariff.
On everything? That's a national sales tax of 10% on anything that unless it's 100% made in the United States.
Right. And these specific reciprocal tariffs are on the worst offenders. Now, I've just worked out the math of what he's done. So, for example, he's looked at the European Union and he claims the European Union charges the US 39%. So the reciprocal tariff is 20%. And so he's basically halved everything. So Tier 1, he claims, charges the US 64%. So 32 is the number that he's come up with. Japan, 46, he's gone in at 24. And then there's countries like Indonesia, which do huge amounts of manufacturing, whose economy is completely different to the US. He claims they charge 64%, and so he's charging exactly half, 32% in the reciprocal tariff.
Then it's worse than I thought.
It's far worse
honestly,
than any of us thought.
This is worse than I thought. It will be very interesting to wake up tomorrow and at 9:30 and take a look at the Dow. You know,
Thailand, he's charging 36% on as a reciprocal tariff. What he's failing to take into account, and look, I'm no economist, but to me, you don't even need to be an economist to work this stuff out. If you look at the economies of Indonesia or of Thailand, for example, considering that the US is the largest economy in the world and has a huge amount of fat in it and could basically pay for everybody else if it had to, he's not taking into account the value of their economy, or the minuscule value of their economy in comparison. Why they need to charge the US tariffs, because that is what builds their economy, and it's still completely affordable for the United States. But to do it reciprocally is just it does not take into account the size of this reciprocal economy.
Yeah, so let's just talk about Japan, for example, because I lived in Japan, so a long time ago, but
You're full of surprises.
Yeah, I did. So obviously, fruits and vegetables and rice is expensive in Japan, and the reason for that is because they have very little farmland.
Yeah.
So obviously, there's been rice farmers in Japan for 1,000 years, right? Many of them like 25 generation rice farms,
right? And they know how to do it.
That's right, but. And Japan has a very high tariff on rice from coming in from other countries, not just the US, all other countries. And because, you know, if they didn't have high rice tariffs, that's it. That's the end of their rice industry, and all their rice farmers would essentially be gone. And you're talking about, you know, 1,000 years of rice farmers, these farms in the same family.
Yeah.
Forever. So Japan can certainly decide, okay, we want to have cheap rice, so we're just going to annihilate our rice farmers that have been part of our culture for thousands of years. We're just going to put them all out of business tomorrow so we can have cheaper rice from the United States. They certainly could do that, but they have made a decision culturally, economically, that this is a part of our soul. This is a part of the culture of our nation, these rice farms. And so we need to preserve and protect them. So our people are just going to have to pay more for rice. And if you want to buy American rice, you can, but it's going to be very expensive. So they've made that decision. So this is something Trump has actually talked about, that he's mad about the rice tariffs from Japan. Well, right. You know, these are it's a relatively small industry in Japan. You know, they don't have a lot of farmland again. So, and it's the same thing with their fruits and vegetables. It's the same kind of deal where, you know, if they didn't have tariffs on their food products, they would have zero farms. They would be absolutely destroyed. So they've made that decision. So,
but this is war.
With steel.
As I see it, Ron, this is a trade war. This is not just reciprocal tariffs, which is a nice way of saying this is a trade war on the countries that do most of the manufacturing of the goods. If you look at the T-shirt that you're wearing and look at the label, there's a good chance it says Indonesia or it says
Nicaragua,
Vietnam, for example.
Yeah, sure, Vietnam.
And these are the countries.
You know what else this has done? Japan, South Korea just held their first economic summit with China in over 5 years.
Yeah.
And they banded together. This was this week. And they said, if Trump hits us with tariffs, we're going to unify. In other words, China, Japan, and South Korea are going to unify with joint reciprocal tariffs against the United States. Now, China has not ever unified with Japan in 3,000 years on anything. I mean, they haven't ever agreed on anything that I'm aware of in their entire history. And I've studied the history of China and Japan and Korea. It hasn't been pleasant relationship. And Trump is unifying them. Trump is bringing them together. They're making new trade agreements on products. Japan and China, mortal enemies of each other for centuries, for thousands of years, are now coming together to make trade agreements with each other on things that they used to do business with the United States on. They're now going to do business with each other. So we are driving our allies and friends and most important trading partners for the last 80 years around the world into the arms of our adversaries.
Talking of China, guess what the percentage he has chosen as reciprocal tariff for China?
I'm going to say 20.
Keep going.
No, it can't be higher than that.
Keep going.
Okay, well, then Jeff Bezos is in trouble. It can't be more than 25.
Keep going.
That's no.
Keep going.
30? I don't know.
Keep going.
Can't be. On all Chinese goods? Wow, I don't even know.
34%.
I mean, that just anything you buy off Amazon just went up 34%. I mean, essentially, you know, that is a massive.
And he admitted, and I'll quote him, he said he was implementing reciprocal tariffs on all countries of approximately half of what they charge us. So this is the extent. European Union, 20%, Vietnam, 46%, Taiwan, 32%, Japan, 24%, India, 26%, South Korea, 25%, and Thailand, one of the sweetest, most beautiful countries, the most gentlest Buddhist country, 36%. He has absolutely no idea about how this is going to crash the world economy, world markets, and world trade. This is an intentional trade war.
I'm going to leave and run down to the store right now and stock up in some pad thai sauce.
Right. Fill your fridge.
But these other countries are now going to retaliate. You know what else this is going to bring back? It's going to bring back the smuggling industry, which has kind of been dormant since, piracy.
Yeah.
Since like, Blackbeard died.
Right.
It's actually going to bring back smuggling. You are going to see international smuggling syndicates bringing like honey and maple syrup across the border in trucks in the middle of the night. I mean, because it's going to make the black market. There's going to be black markets that are going to form of foreign products around the world.
Yeah.
That's what this is going to do, because it's going to be very lucrative to evade tariffs, especially like on the Mexican-Canadian border. I mean, the Mexican-U.S. border and the Canada-U.S. border. There's going to be stuff smuggled across all the time now, just simply to avoid tariffs.
Let's talk about some good news for a minute, because I'm feeling a little discombobulated now. So I could do with some good news. Let's talk about Cory Booker, because he broke the filibuster record last night, didn't he? He basically, what was the total in the end? Like 25 hours or something?
Yeah.
Incredible. And the great thing about what Cory Booker did last night, and I hope you watched. I'll show a little clip, but he basically, it wasn't really an official filibuster, but he did take up 25 hours of Senate time. And instead of doing what other people who've tried to break the record before, like Ted Cruz reading children's books, or people reading the telephone directory, or just trying to waste official business time, he brought us a 25-hour speech on not just America's gritty history, but also the own history of his family, of his constituents, people who have written to him, telling stories of struggle and strife under this Trump administration. And it was a work of art, and I don't quite know how he didn't go to the toilet for 25 hours. I don't know why I'm so obsessed with that, but I can't stop thinking about it. Let's show a quick clip of Cory Booker.
Because we couldn't do it.
Because you and I, at the end of the show, people don't know this. We're both
struggle with 25 minutes.
Okay, here we go. Let's take a look.
Nay. Behold, Lord, here I am. And so I confess that I have been imperfect, I confess that I've been inadequate to the moment. I confess that the Democratic Party has made terrible mistakes, that have given lane to this demagogue. I confess we all must look in the mirror and say we will do better. And it's not just defining ourselves what we're against. We, the next generation, as the baby boomers are leaving the stage, the last baby boomer president, we have to say that we're going to redeem the dream. We're going to dream America anew. We're going to start talking about bold things that don't divide people, that unite people. Bold things that excite the moral imagination of a country to do better, to go higher, that call us together. This is the time where new leaders in our country must emerge. I'm not talking about senators. I'm talking about citizens.
This is what Democrats have been crying out for. This is the kind of pushback, the kind of activism, and the kind of language that has been missing from this kind of democratic power vacuum. What was your reaction to this, Ron?
Yeah, it was a briefly planned, spontaneous thing. It was something that he thought of, I think, a few days ago that he wanted to do. And then he planned it out and he did it. And part of what he did, he didn't eat for 2 days and he didn't drink for 24 hours. So he dehydrated himself.
Which we do not recommend, by the way.
He didn't tell anyone.
People shouldn't try this.
What?
I'm just saying people shouldn't try this at home. Don't dehydrate yourself for 48 hours. It's not worth it.
No. And he didn't tell anyone he was going to do it ahead of time. He made the announcement, because I follow these guys pretty closely. He made the announcement at like 9 o'clock. He's like, and all he said was, I'm going to give a speech on the floor of the Senate and it's going to be a while. And it was like 9 o'clock at night. And I'm like, what's going on here? This is kind of strange. I thought, and my first reaction was, oh man, another freaking pathetic stunt, by the Democrats trying to, prove that they're going to do something. And, so I was, as usual, skeptical and cynical. But, waking up in the morning and watching it throughout the day, I'm like, man, this literally was everything that we've been wanting, and I thought, I just kept thinking about Schumer the whole time, because I thought, I wanted them to speak from the heart. And, he could have got up there and read the phone book or something like that, like other people who have filibustered have done. But he didn't do that. He spoke from the heart. He spoke passionately. He spoke about many different issues that were very important. He talked about the party and the soul of the party. He talked about his family. Every time I dipped in and to check out what he was up to, which I did a lot throughout the day, it was a different topic, and it was passionate. It was moving. It wasn't fake. It wasn't phony. And, there was a moment where like Schumer came in and tried to interrupt, because there were a few times when people would come in and ask questions, and Schumer just said like the dumbest freaking thing in the world. Yeah. Like, tell those Republicans, and Booker's like, no, he's like, that's not, this isn't about Republican, Democrat. It's about America. Yeah. And like, it was like Schumer just came in with his usual bullshit and almost like was like nails on a chalkboard in the middle of what Booker was doing. And Booker just kind of like shoot him off and was like, Chuck, I'm fine. You need to go have a coffee or something. And I just thought, it's something that Schumer could not do physically, intellectually, emotionally. It's not in him to do this at this point. And I thought, what if Cory Booker was the majority leader? And I've talked about Mark Kelly and other people, but I thought, imagine if he was, like, how much more the vibe shift that there would be, the energy shift that there would be in the Senate between Chuck and his backroom scheming, which is what he does. That's his whole game, is just backroom deals and scheming. And then all these platitudes and slogans that he's been saying since 1980 that are all tired and worn out.
And which Hakeem Jeffries is repeating. Booker. Yeah, because to me, Jeffries and Schumer are very much aligned. Cory Booker's an interesting character, though, isn't he? Because he does divide opinion with some. Why do you think that is?
I think that a lot of people felt like he was a little bit phony and a little bit full of himself. And I can tell you that I heard last night from a lot of Booker critics, including Democrats from New Jersey who are Booker critics, who thought, he's not my, and they said their opinion of him changed overnight.
Yeah.
That they think that they're viewing him in a different light. He stepped up for the moment. He answered the call. Look, is this going to change anything? And Republicans are ridiculing him. Oh, this accomplished nothing. It accomplished a lot, I think. Yeah, and this is why morale is so important for Democrats, and maintaining the energy and the enthusiasm and the passion to fight. And I think that that's what he did. It was a rallying cry, along with what Chris Murphy's been doing, AOC and Bernie have been doing, and not Gallego. There's the other congressman from California. I'm drawing a blank on him right now, but not Richie Torres. He's from New York. Anyway, there's been a few others that have been out there, and I think it's catching on. But I do think that there are people who are just not capable of doing it. And I've talked about running your own social media accounts. I mean, how few Democrats in Congress do their own social media. And it's like, my whole thought is if you can't play this game in this environment, dealing with this autocrat in the modern social media world, it is time for you to get off the stage. Nancy stepped aside.
Yeah.
When her time, she knew it was her time. Joe stepped aside, probably a little too late, but he stepped aside. Chuck needs to step aside. And I don't want to make this all about him, because it's really more about Booker. But I think that a lot of people felt watching Booker why don't we have a majority or minority leader like this?
And that's the level of energy, and just to be able to do that, because it's hard, if you work in public service, it's a lot of work. You do commit a lot of your time. You don't get much downtime apart from, the recesses and summer break and stuff. But when you're on, you're on. And I got a sense that the stamina involved was really, if this was like Gladiators, we really had our top gladiator. We had the Russell Crowe of the lawmakers presented himself. And so it would be foolish to let this slide as just a stunt and take advantage of how he's identified himself as a strong man.
From a historical perspective, it kind of reminds me of Gandhi's hunger strike a little bit, in a smaller sense, which is it's a symbolic gesture. It's one person doing one small thing. And yet it has this ripple effect, and it impacts people. It impacts people in a visceral way.
Yes.
And Gandhi's, hunger strike, he did a few, but they were all quite effective. And all these measures of civil disobedience, whether it's, blacks in the South sitting at white lunch counters.
Yes.
I mean, all they did was sit down, or Rosa Parks going to the front of the bus.
Yeah, knowing they were going to get arrested.
All they did was sit down, and you could say, oh, what did they do? What did they accomplish? They changed the world, and sometimes that's all it can take, is one gesture that energizes and motivates other people to get off their butts and say, I can't just sit here, because all these other senators have to be looking at what Booker did and say, what did I do this week?
Yeah.
And
have I done enough?
It's time I start doing more.
Well, I completely agree. I just love the idea that it will motivate people to know that you don't have to allow tyranny just to run with itself, that by standing up to it, it will make a difference. We have to take a quick break. I want to come back, though, and talk about the effect of this. We also have a lot of stuff that went on in the Senate. We have Mike Johnson, of course, in Congress. We've got the Anna Paulina Luna story about how she's been joining forces with some Democrats. Lots of interesting stuff to come. We'll do that next here on Uncovered. A secret weapon is a great asset to have in your back pocket. It helps you get ahead in life. And that's how Mack Weldon thinks about clothing, as a secret weapon, timeless classic style that's infused with performance fabrics and hidden details. Whether you're looking for light as air underwear, anti-odor tees or sweaters with lightweight warmth, Mack Weldon has a full range of clothes that feel comfortable all day long and never go out of style. I love these black tees that I wear from Mack Weldon. They're comfortable, they allow me to breathe without getting hot and sweaty despite my environment. Some people want to look good without calling attention to themselves. Well, Mack Weldon apparel gives you understated looks for understated confidence. They're not flashy, just classic, always in style, and made from the world's most comfortable performance materials. Mack Weldon clothes are designed to fit your style and demands of modern life. They look like regular clothes, but they feel like the latest in modern comfort. Get timeless looks with modern comfort from Mack Weldon. Go to mackweldon.com and get 25% off your first order of $125 or more with promo code UNCOVERED. That's mackweldon.com. Promo code UNCOVERED. And you can find links to our sponsors in the description below. Okay, Ron, I know that you're a big fan of Anna Paulina Luna. Were you surprised that she is, because she's, consistent conservative votes, she has decided on this particular subject that actually what the Republicans are after doesn't make much sense? Just explain it to us before I show the clip of her.
This whole thing started about where she had a baby, and there's two members of Congress who just recently had babies, one Democrat, one Republican, and she's the Republican. And so she introduced, of course, anything that personally affects them, they get very passionate about. We see this on both sides, really. Anything that affects them personally or their reelections or whatever, they go all in and spend inordinate amount of time on. So this has become like her crusade, is to get proxy voting. Now, the reason why Republicans don't want proxy voting is because Democrats are old. We have more older people in Congress than they do. So what they're saying is, as soon as we allow proxy voting for moms, because what Luna's bill is for like parents, moms or dads, they can vote by proxy for 6 weeks after the child is born, right? So what the Republicans think is that's going to open up the Pandora's box, and then it's going to be cancer treatments, it's going to be physical rehab, could be
terrible.
Could be drug rehab. It could be that you're going to. Everybody's going to start wanting to vote by proxy for a variety of things, and it'll be abused. So they opposed it, and Democrats were actually very quiet on it, and it was kind of hard to figure out what they were going to do. But I think when they watched how this played out, they decided to side with Luna, all of them. And because the way this played out is that Johnson was so desperate to block this from coming to the floor that he made it part of the rules package that had to do with the SAVE Act. In other words, they were going to bring the SAVE Act to the floor, which is their voting rights, voting bill, voter ID, and all that.
Voter suppression bill.
Along with other things, that they wanted to bring this to the floor. So they attached Luna's bill to that, killing Luna's bill to that. So the only way they thought that was their gimmick, like Republicans are now going to have to vote for this rules package, which will kill Luna's proxy voting bill because they want to get the SAVE Act to the floor, right? That was the political calculus that Johnson made. He basically played chicken with them and said, there's no way that Republicans are going to abandon me to back her. And he probably thought a lot of Democrats who are against proxy, because there are plenty of Democrats against proxy voting. He probably thought some of them were going to come along and vote for this. But what happened is Luna sort of built this little coalition of her friends, which is 9 Republicans that are all far right, trying to use the family values argument. We need to be for motherhood and all that. And presented it that way to them and convinced them to vote against Johnson. So what happened is basically Johnson's entire agenda for the week was voted down by 9 members of his own party, including Luna, led by Luna, and all the Democrats. So he just had a little hissy fit yesterday after the vote and adjourned the House for the week, sent everybody home. He was so mad didn't need to do that. They could still do business today, but
Yeah.
he was so upset that his whole plan for the week just went up in smoke. And, you know, the two of them, Luna and Johnson, were going back and forth at each other all night last night, which was fun to watch.
Let's take a look at what she had to say in the House.
For a while, we've had the majority and we've had the ability to bring legislation to the floor on election integrity and also to call out rogue judges. And yet they chose at this point in time to tie this discharge petition killer to this rule that would also permanently paint me and the members supporting it. And I would like to also share that I'm one of the most conservative members of this body. I'd like to hold up my voting record to anyone else as not just being anti-election integrity, but also enabling a position that I don't typically agree with. That in itself, I would say in this entire process has been the most disappointing, especially from among my party.
We should also remind people that there was proxy voting during the pandemic, right? Which meant that they were able to continue Congress's business without people having to travel. And, you know, as with a lot of the things that happened during the pandemic, like additional drop boxes, voting, you know, extending voting hours and stuff, all that stuff should have stayed. It would have brought us, you know, up to date, made us like a modern democracy. But of course, all of that was wound back by Republicans.
You know, the other thing that was interesting is you had people like Marjorie Taylor Greene go after Luna on this, you know, and it was funny to see, the family values, you know, Republicans who were all like, you need to have more kids and all that, basically telling her like, some of them were saying like, you shouldn't have kids or you shouldn't run for office if you have small kids or if you intend to start families, because if you can't show up to work, you shouldn't be in Congress. You should be doing something else. So it was funny to see them like attacking her on those issues when at the same time, their whole message is like, everybody should be having big families and kids at the same time. And then basically Johnson came out and just said, you've ruined Trump's agenda. You know, like Luna has destroyed, you know, our business for the week, and she is hurting Trump. So he was basically like trying to say that the 9 Republicans who voted for her with her on this, who are the most conservative Republicans in Congress, Luna is right about that, are now like anti-Trump. And I mean, Johnson is just putting on a clinic on how not to lead the House of Representatives in an effective way.
Let's take a look.
Well, it's a very disappointing result on the floor there. A handful of Republicans joined with all the Democrats to take down a rule. That's rarely done. It's very unfortunate in this case. 96% of House Republicans voted against proxy voting because they believe it's unconstitutional and they agree that it would open a Pandora's box. And so that's what we just saw. Let me just make this clear. That rule being brought down means that we can't have any further action on the floor this week. That means we will not be voting on the SAVE Act for election integrity. We will not be voting on the rogue judges who are attacking President Trump's agenda. We will not be taking down these terrible Biden policies with the CRA votes. All that was just wiped off the table. It's very unfortunate. We'll regroup and come back, and we'll have to do this again.
Yeah, he's such a phony. I mean, it doesn't convince anybody, hopefully.
No,
and
Luna
also
correctly pointed out, like, that was his choice.
Yeah.
He did not have to put the proxy voting killer and attach it to this other stuff.
Right.
But he did that as part of a power play to dare Republicans to vote against part of Trump's agenda to protect proxy voting. And 9 of them stood up and said, we'll call your bluff. And maybe he didn't expect that, which shows like this man is not a tactician. He's not a strategic thinker, which is why he can never unify his caucus on anything and ever get anything done. He's not a leader. He doesn't know how to do it. We see this time and time again. And this is a fiasco. And, you know, adjourning for the week again. I mean, this guy gives them so much time off. I've never seen a speaker give members take so many weeks off over the last 2.5 years. They're barely ever in DC because of this guy. Maybe he has a lot of hobbies or something, the places that he needs to go. But this is his pattern. They do nothing for like 3 months. And then 2 weeks before the government's going to shut down, there's this mass panic. And that's the way he runs the House.
only the best people for Donald Trump. I mean, we're going to find this, and maybe we should remind people, because, it's been a few years now, the turnover of staff under the Trump administration during its first term from 2017. Just a vast number of people that fall out with Trump. Trump doesn't like, he gets rid of them so he can blame them rather than take any heat himself. And I think that potentially Johnson, who's very much a Trump loyalist, could end up going that way if he doesn't show more skills. You mentioned that Howard Lutnick's probably going to end up going that way, which would do us all a favor. But, this huge turnover, we're only 2 months in, hasn't really started yet.
No, I mean, we came close there with Waltz.
That's right.
Who I think could be another one that could go relatively soon. Hegseth is another one. What was interesting is that on that deal, Trump blamed Waltz much more than Hegseth. And the general public, the media, Democrats were the opposite, because Trump, what was more important to him about that scandal was the leak, was talking to a reporter. Yes. That's what bothered Trump about, not the national security implications or all. So while everyone else was focused on Hegseth doing it this way and how sloppy and ridiculous that was, Trump was more focused. Waltz came very close to losing it. He could have been the first one, very close to losing his job. And he is the one that is on thin ice here and is just hanging on by a hair to his job. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see who is the first member of the Trump administration to go and get fired, because we have Musk now. Basically, they're talking about him leaving. You got people with knives out for Lutnick, people with knives out for what do you call it, Waltz. But the other thing is, like, they all seem to be rallying around Hegseth. There's nobody in Trump world that wants to get rid of Hegseth, and he's probably the most incompetent one of all. Same thing, RFK too, who's been doing a lot of boneheaded stuff lately, but he's likely not to go anywhere.
One of these three stooges we haven't mentioned is J.D. Vance. He made a huge fool of himself in Greenland the other day. His wife was going to be going initially. Last week we showed that video of him going, oh, everyone was so excited about her going, I'm going to go too. The reaction from Greenland was like, we don't want you here. And so the plans were scaled down, so much so that he ended up just going to the Space Force base in the Northwest, where they have a couple of hundred US troops. He stayed for 3 hours, made a speech, shook a few hands, got back on the plane and left again. It was pretty awkward. Let's take a look at the speech, or some of the speech, that he made in front of these this military personnel.
I think that talking about anything too far in the future is way too premature. We do not think that military force is ever going to be necessary. We think this makes sense. And because we think the people of Greenland are rational and good, we think we're going to be able to cut a deal, Donald Trump style, to ensure the security of this territory, but also the United States of America. I'll do one more question.
The false argument that he was making is that Denmark, and I quote, hasn't done a very good job for Greenland. I mean, that is, again, that lacks all intellectual argument, doesn't make any sense. Greenland have actually been increasing, Denmark have actually been increasing their investment in Greenland recently. And in fact, the United States used to have a huge military presence in Greenland, and it's been scaled back and scaled back and scaled back. And now it's just this small base. So what's the real story here? I mean, who's behind this and how's it going to play out?
Yeah, well, this all goes back to Trump, somebody showing Greenland to Trump on the map years ago, and him looking at the size of it and thinking, oh, he's never been to Greenland, but, wow, this is, and telling him about all the minerals that are there. Yeah. Same thing that Lindsey Graham did with Trump in Ukraine that made, Trump had no use for Ukraine years ago. And Lindsey Graham was the one who wanted to convince Trump to care about Ukraine. And then he brought the map and sat down with Trump and showed him all the minerals and rare earth minerals that were littered throughout the country, and interested Trump in how much money that could be extorted from them in minerals. So that now causes Trump to care about Ukraine. Same playbook with Greenland. But this trip was a complete disaster. It started out being billed as Usha Vance, his wife was going to go and attend all these events, dog sled races, and on all these ceremonies and different things. And the Greenland people originally agreed to that. Then she announced she was bringing the national security advisor, Mike Waltz, and the guy in the administration that is in charge of natural resources and minerals under the Commerce Department. They were going to bring them with them on the trip. So Greenland correctly viewed that as a provocation and said, this is not what we were told. We don't want you to come. And then they got the word that there was going to be big demonstrations and protests everywhere Usha went. So that caused JD to say, okay, now I'm going to go with my wife since there's going to be these problems. Then they just decided to cancel all the events that were originally planned on this trip, to fly all this way to northern Greenland. He stayed at the base for 3 hours, gave a speech in front of active duty military, and then flew back. So a complete public relations, international disaster, accomplished absolutely nothing other than to make us look bad and to make Vance look like a fool.
And he certainly pulled that off. I mean, there's also a theory that it's Putin that wants Greenland. And if Trump is aligned with Putin, as we discussed last week, that actually this is just Trump doing Putin's bidding, ultimately. If you look at the geography, I think someone posted a very interesting image of the globe from above. We were so used to looking at it, this way. But if you change your perspective and look down and look at the way that the land masses connect and the closeness, you can see not just as a shipping route, but as a place to use militarily, that Putin would be very interested in kind of in this landmass, as well as the wealth that it generates too. So do you believe there's any truth to that this is really just Trump playing a long game, as he is with the war in Ukraine? Obviously, he wants Putin to win in Ukraine, so he's just like playing along with these fake ceasefire meetings and everything else. That actually this is all just to appease his Führer.
Yeah, because I think if you pay attention to Russian media, as I do, they're talking a lot these days about the U.S. and Russia forming an alliance against Europe, and they're cheering on these tariffs, for example, against Europe as another way for the U.S. and Europe to separate from each other and for them to step in and take the vacuum. So yeah, when they're viewing things like places like Ukraine or Greenland, they're looking at it like, how can we get in here with the United States against Europe and divide up what's there, whether it's minerals and power plants in Ukraine or the same bases in Greenland. So I don't think that that's going to happen. I certainly don't see the Trump administration, if they do make some. First of all, I can't see them trying to actually take over Greenland, because not only would it break the NATO charter, it would basically destroy NATO and any relationship we have with the Europeans. But I think Republicans in Congress would be dead set against it. When most of them get asked about this, they say this is all a joke. This is not serious. Trump is not really serious about taking Greenland, when he is. And so I think if they actually did go forward and try and do something like that, again, we're always looking to Republicans in Congress to step up and do something about it. At some point, maybe they will.
I've reported before that I believe that Trump, and this is the reason why he remains close with Pete Hegseth, who is a warmonger at the end of the day. He really is very keen for the action, is that they are going to start some war, whether it be with Iran.
Iran is most likely.
Right, because then he gets the additional war powers of the presidency. That means he can cancel future elections, because clearly, as we saw from the Wisconsin race, their voter suppression has not gone far enough, and that it is possible for Democrats to win in the short term. So they're either going to have to ramp up the voter suppression, get these new voter laws, voter ID and everything else in place so that they can continue to win elections, or they're going to have to start a war so they can cancel elections. And I just don't trust him. I wouldn't put it past him. And I believe that people like Pete Hegseth and J.D. Vance, their extremist views, their far-right views, isolationist views, they just are ready to go to war with the first country that causes them a problem.
Yep. Iran's most likely, because the policy of the United States is that Iran will not get a nuclear weapon. And since Trump pulled us out of the Iran nuclear deal,
I was going to say there was a deal.
There was a deal. In 2018, Trump pulled us out. So since that time, the nuclear program inside Iran has rapidly accelerated, and they are getting very close. And Israel has said they will not allow Iran. So the only way to stop it is either through negotiations, which seem to be going nowhere fast, or use a military strike to take out their nuclear facility. And everything I hear is that's what they're going to do, that they're going to take it out with a military strike. And Iran has already threatened massive retaliation, whatever that means, if that happens. So I think if there's one place where it's more like where, we're going to be involved in a conflict, that's where it's going to be.
It is terrifying, because if you add it all up with these tariffs, incidentally, no tariff on Russia, from what I could see from that list, just point that out there. But, when you take the tariffs, which is going to destabilize the entire world, and then you add that to them being, looking for trouble and causing trouble in Greenland and Panama and Yemen and elsewhere, that the world is going to feel a whole lot less safe. And you couple that with the lack of, with the failings of the national security services. I mean, there was this news about this Gmail leak now, that they're all been using Gmail to communicate at the senior levels in the security services. We really are setting ourselves up for failure. The might of America is being compromised, and it's being exposed as such.
Yeah, it's going to be hard when we're looking for friends and allies, and we're in the middle of trade wars with them, and we're constantly insulting them, and we're saying that they would be speaking German if it wasn't for us, and saying things like that, and we're going to take over Greenland and this and that. This is not helpful. And it's not. And when we get in trouble and we look to them, they've always been there for us, just like we've been there for them. But that's not necessarily going to be the case going forward. Keep in mind, all of this damage has been done. It's not even been 3 months yet.
I know.
Crazy.
I mean, that also was baked into Project 2025, the idea you need to get all this stuff done in the first 100 days.
Yeah.
Flood.
Shock and awe. Shock and awe.
Flood the zone. Yeah. Fortunately, Mike Lindell wants to run against Tim Walz as governor of Minnesota in 2026. I mean, this could be the savior that everyone's been looking for, wouldn't you say? I mean, isn't this going to right all of the wrongs?
Yeah, well, I definitely, pay attention to Lindell from time to time, check in with him to see what's going on with the Pillow Man. And I tuned into his show the other night, and he was talking about running for governor of Minnesota. I was like, okay, here we go. So, he's talking about how unpopular Tim Walz is supposedly in his own state, which, again, if you live in these online right-wing social media bubbles, you would think that Tim Walz is the most unpopular, terrible person in the world, because all they do is go after him.
Yeah.
But in the state of Minnesota, he's quite popular.
Yeah.
So they don't have term limits. He's in his second term, but he can run for a third. He probably will. Some talk about him running for president. I hear that being knocked around. I hope that's not the case, because I don't think he's the right guy for 2028. But I think he's probably going to run for that third term. But will Lindell do it? I mean, that will certainly add quite a bit to the entertainment value of that race. I don't know what other serious Republicans would be in that race, but it's always interesting to see how he would do, because Republican primary voters are the most hardcore of the hardcore. And, for all that we laugh at him, he is actually very popular with the MAGA base. They love Mike Lindell. I don't know how much that's going to actually translate into people wanting to vote for him for governor, but Minnesota elected Jesse Ventura, a professional wrestler, as their governor years ago. So it's a state that can do some strange things. Would he win? No, I'm just talking about, would he win the Republican nomination? Because if he does, that would hand that governorship to the Democrats for sure.
Let's take a look at his announcement.
Of the state of Minnesota, because right now we have a voice that could be big enough where when I do my due diligence and we're going to do polling, we're going to get a couple different polls to be taken. We're going to be you do all kinds of due diligence. I'm just checking into all this now, but they're saying, well, why would you consider it now and you didn't consider it then? Because we got our voice back, and all the lies that Waltz is putting out we will see through them. It won't just be me saying it, or we're saying it on Lindell TV. The whole world will be screaming it, that these lies will be uncovered. And what are they going to do? Go, well, Mike Lindell, he was a crack addict. Yeah. What else you got? So there you have.
Just a crack addict. All right, let's move on because we don't have much time. Talk to me about Joe Rogan because, as you know, it's probably a good time to mention that Midas Touch consistently knocks Joe Rogan off the top podcast spot with the Midas Touch podcast with the brothers. His politics has always been a little bit woolly. People didn't really know, but, for those of us who can see into his soul, the guy is clearly a staunch conservative and obviously came out for Donald Trump in the last election, had him on for, was it 3 or 4 hours on his podcast, and there was criticism of Kamala Harris not going on Rogan and all that stuff. We know about that. But now it's like he's found a soul all of a sudden when he found out that there was a hairdresser who got lumped in with these gangs who were deported to El Salvador. He started to kind of, maybe it was like an inkling of empathy. Let's take a look.
This is kind of crazy that could be possible. That's horrific. And that's bad for the cause. Like, the cause is, let's get the gang members out. Everybody agrees. But let's not innocent gay hairdressers get lumped up with the gangs. And then, how long before that guy can get out? Can we figure out how to get him out? Is there any plan in place to alert the authorities that they've made a horrible mistake and correct it?
What's going on, Ron?
This is really an interesting dynamic to watch play out because we are seeing some cracks in the Republican coalition on immigration that is being caused by the heavy-handedness of Homan and Noem and Stephen Miller, on this issue, because how they sold it during the campaign was, we're going to get rid of the criminals. We're going to get rid of migrants who have committed crimes, who have criminal records, committed crimes. That's who we're going to prioritize. We're going to find them first. We're going to get them out. And then we're going to talk about the rest of them. And so that's how they sold it. And that's how they're selling it now, that these are all gang members. We're getting the worst of the worst out first. But the problem is they might be getting some of them, but they're not. They're they're casting a wide net. It's sort of like, the tuna nets that are getting a lot of dolphin, right? That's what they're doing. They're getting dolphins in their tuna nets. And the press, of course, is making a big deal out of those incidents of people who are not gang members, who are scooped up in these things, who are either not from the countries that they claim they're from, they're not gang members, or they don't have any criminal record at all. Because the numbers are, because the thing is, the Trump administration, they want to get rid of everybody, all migrants. It's in other words, they're not just focused on migrants with criminal records. They want all migrants deported.
Especially educated ones and scholars and people who are in universities, which is why, kidnapping people off the street, an innocent girl walking down the street looking at her phone, a bunch of guys show up not in uniform, they don't identify themselves, they've got masks on, they grab her and they disappear her and put her in a detention facility. Nobody wants to see that.
So there's a significant chunk of the Republican base, for sure, that doesn't care about any of this. As far, their attitude is, they're here, they shouldn't be here, it doesn't matter. We don't care about the due process. We don't care about if they're gang members or not. We don't care if they have criminal records or not. Grab them and get them out. And that's a chunk of, but the question is, that's a chunk of the Republican base. But the question is, how big is that chunk? Yeah. What percentage of the Republican Party is like Rogan here, who's kind of a right-leaning libertarian more than a conservative, right? And so how many of them are out there that say, you know what, we're not comfortable with this. We're not comfortable with grabbing people off the street with no court hearing, no due process, claiming they're gang members and throwing them on a plane. And introducing the dynamic of this prison in El Salvador has also caused some cracks in the coalition, because instead of I think a lot of Republicans, moderate Republicans, are fine with taking them and sending them back to their countries. But when you start talking about, we're going to take them out of this construction company in Tennessee where they're building a house, and we're going to grab them and put them on a plane and send them to prison, a forced labor camp in El Salvador, when they're not even from El Salvador, they're from some other country, they're not for that. And so I think that the way that the Trump administration is handling the deportations is causing serious problems. Again, not with the hardcore base, but with the moderates in the Republican Party. And there are still enough, hopefully, to matter. And it could ultimately hurt them in the more they cut into the bone. In other words, it's easy. The first 1% of deportations, it's easy to get mostly bad people. Yeah. But when you start cutting deeper and you get from the first couple 100,000 into the next 100,000, now you're talking about people with kids, people with families, people who are working, and that is going to affect the average American seeing that differently than, people covered in tattoos.
Or a tattoo for autism awareness that they thought was a gang.
Yeah. Yeah.
The humanity of this is really where it's at. What you're talking about is us as humans having a collective humanity. And we often talk about how so many of these Republicans seem to be devoid of humanity and empathy. But I'm hoping that this is an example to us all that there is still connective tissue in where we connect with fellow humans, no matter what their background. Because there are people who are being deported who've been living here for 20 or 30 years, whose lives are here. They've never even been to the places that they're being sent back to. And then we're hearing about the appalling conditions that some are being held in. I mean, there was that Canadian girl who made a mistake with her paperwork, ended up sleeping on a concrete floor for 2 weeks. And it's important that the media cover these stories and really expose and explain how there is indiscriminate grabbing and disappearing of people without, avoiding the court. I mean, in the case of a couple of these people, that they weren't even able, the lawyers weren't even able to get into a court before they'd been taken away. I mean, Mahmoud Khalid, they tried to hear him in Louisiana. And
because from the politics of it, every person in America who wants all migrants deported is already voting Republican. Like right. they're not adding, on the fence. They're not adding any new votes or increasing their base with what they're doing. They're only hurting themselves. They're only eroding the moderate part of their voting base and the independents who voted for them with the tactics that they're using. So they're not adding any new supporters with what they're doing, but they're losing people who do believe that too many migrants were allowed into the country during the Biden years. And they believe that our immigration system was broken and too lax and our asylum system is wrong. There's plenty of people in the middle of the country politically who believe all of that and who voted for Trump because of that. But they're losing those people with their tactics and the heavy-handed way that they're implementing these deportations.
Yeah.
And Holman's rhetoric doesn't help either, where he's out there saying, I don't care about, judges. I don't care what they rule. I don't care what elected officials do, threatening to put elected officials in jail. he's not helping them politically at all either.
There's an English word we have for people like him. We would call him a bruiser. He's a proper bruiser, right? Finally, we have to finish, but I want to talk about Trump dropping these little pearls, these nuggets of information about him running for a third term, and if we should take him seriously. Let's have a quick look.
But if you were allowed, for some reason, to run for a third term, is there a thought that the Democrats could try to run Barack Obama against you?
I'd love that.
For his third term?
Boy, I'd love that. That would be a good one. I'd like that. No, people are asking me to run, and there's a whole story about running for a third term. I don't know. I never looked into it. They do say there's a way you can do it, but I don't know about that. But I have not looked into it. I want to do a fantastic job. We have 4 years, just about, almost close to 4 years. Time is flying, but it's still close to 4 years, and we're getting a lot of credit for having done a great job.
Yeah, great job tanking the economy and disappearing people off the streets. I do take him at his word. I personally believe he will not relinquish power. He's done that before, tried to stay in office in 2021. This guy is not normal. We cannot treat him like a normal candidate. He is emotionally and mentally compromised, and he just thinks that the whole world revolves around him.
So there's different ways of dealing with this. Of course, Republicans in Congress are all saying he's just joking, he's just trolling, he's just trying to get you guys upset.
Yeah.
All right, fine. Well, we've heard that before.
Yeah.
That they always say he's just joking, and then he actually
there was an
he was just joking about tariffs. He's just joking about Greenland. He's just joking about all this stuff, and then he does it.
Yeah.
So no, Trump doesn't really joke. Trump floats trial balloons is what he does.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he does. He brings this stuff up and talks about it to gauge the reaction of people and whether they're going to push back. Or so you have two schools of thought among Democrats, and Chris Murphy, for example, the senator from Connecticut, just said Democrats need to just ignore this. They need to don't get distracted, and I hear that a lot. Don't get distracted by all these little things that Trump throws out there to divert away from his agenda. And I agree with that, and I disagree with it. So here's what I think. What I think is, yes, you can't get distracted and diverted from what you're working on today or what you're opposing him on this week if he floats something that maybe could happen in 2028. However, so I agree that you can't let his mania divert you from your purpose and your task and purpose right now. But at the same time, take this shit seriously, because he's not joking. He does not, I don't think that he will ever leave voluntarily. I mean, he may drop dead of cholesterol at some point. 4 years is a long time for a guy his age. But I don't believe that he intends to relinquish power voluntarily. So I think this is something where you just have to file it away, and you have to prepare for this contingency to happen. We can't get caught flat-footed and sleeping like we did in 2020 and January 6th. We got to take these things seriously, because people did not take January 6th seriously leading up to it. They all claim today, oh, yes, we knew it was going to be bad. No, I was there in the middle of it trying to warn people of what was going to happen. And everyone told me, oh, Trump's just being Trump. You're just trying to stir things up. You're trying to be alarmist. So I remember all those many thousands of people on social media telling me that, who all now claim, oh, yes, we knew January 6th was. No, you didn't know. Okay. There was a handful of us who were saying
that's
that.
Right.
Not
None
many.
of us were surprised either.
Not
that's
many.
The other thing. Yeah.
And so it's the same thing with this. It's okay, don't take it lightly, take it seriously, but don't let it distract you at the same time.
Okay. We have to finish. If you want to download the audio podcast, that drops later tonight, wherever you get yours. Don't forget to check out the sponsors down in the description below. Rewind, watch again, share the show. Please try and grow it as we try and reach as many people as possible with these important messages. Ron, we'll come back next Wednesday and do it again. Thank you for today. I'll see you next week.
All right. You got it.